Welcome to the live stream, everybody. About to record episode 21. Getting it going. Hit record on the first recording. Record on the second. And 3, 2, 1.
You're listening to Direct Sports Daily, your source for a fresh new take on all the latest headlines from the world of sports. And now, here's your host, George Bennett.
Welcome to the show, everybody. Today's May 1st, 2017. And today, gonna wrap up first round of the NBA playoffs and final few rounds in the NFL draft. So, hello?
Hey, what's up?
You got time to talk some hockey or no?
What's that?
You got time to talk some hockey or no?
Yeah, what time?
Like now?
Now, I'm not at home right now. I can be home in about, 20 minutes.
All right, you want to call back later then?
Yeah, sure. Like, should I call right when I get home or?
Yeah, as soon as you're ready to go.
Okay.
I'm recording right
Can do.
now, so.
Okay, sounds good. All right, I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
All right.
That was Andrew Dodson. We're going to have him on to talk some hockey later in the show. But I forgot what I was even talking about before that. But before he comes on, let's get the NBA out of the way because he's not going to be able to talk NBA. One of the weird things that happens occasionally is the second round will start before the first round ends, and that's what happened here. The Boston Celtics end up taking a win 123 to 111 over the Washington Wizards and the start of the second round in the East. At one point, the Celtics looked pretty inept against the Bulls, but it appears they finally got it together. So we'll see what happens with them. Big game out of Isaiah Thomas, as we've come to expect. 33 points. Al Horford, big day. 10 assists from him. One rebound away from a Russell Westbrook in this game. Also has 21 points. John Wall did what John Wall does. Gets nearly 20-20 with assists. Gets 20 and 16. So Bradley Beal showed up. The story yet again for the Wizards is that front court. Subpar game out of, I think it's Marcus Morris player, Markieff Morris. I forget which one is which, quite frankly, between the Morris twins. I think they have Markieff. Yeah, Markieff. And Marcus plays for the Pistons. But, yeah, the backcourt for the Wizards is unquestionably good. And obviously, Isaiah Thomas, the defensive liability that he is, he's going to give up whatever to the opposing point guard. So we can just come to expect that. But as far as the other players are concerned, especially in the front court, they need to step it up. So the much bigger story, the Utah Jazz take the series with the Clippers. So that ends the first round. What was a very, very annoying first round to watch. I am thanking my lucky stars we're finally in the second round. So the Jazz take this one. I don't think they stand a chance against the Warriors, quite frankly, especially having been pushed to 7 against the Clip Show. But uh, it's really weird because I could easily see the Jazz just going down like 4 or 5 to the Wizards. I think that especially if Rudy Gobert cannot stay healthy, he only plays 13 minutes in this one. He's definitely a great equalizer. Like with his rim protection and everything, he's able to sort of erase a lot of mistakes made defensively, which there aren't too many. Like up front, they're pretty solid defensively in the backcourt actually, but Rudy Gobert is obviously helps that. But big game out of Derek Favors. He puts up 17 and 11. He's sort of been what's been massaging this Rudy Gobert injury to a certain extent. Now, obviously not literally. That'd be kind of weird, but hey. Moving forward for the Clippers. That's the big story everyone wants to discuss. What do they do now that they're without any games left to go and without Blake Griffin or Chris Paul under contract? Do you just bust that thing up? And I think DeAndre Jordan has maybe a year left. I am one of those people. I'm in full favor of a complete rebuild. You have tried for the better part of the last decade to make Lob City work and make it a championship caliber squad, but it clearly has not worked. The combination of J.J. Redick and Luke Richard and Mute, all those guys. At some point, you just got to give it up, and I think that time is now. But that's for them to decide. Ultimately, there's been a lot of like I've talked about these rumors to death. It almost feels like they're true. Blake Griffin to OKC, although that would take a lot of maneuvering on OKC's part because the money they have no cap space. I don't know how they have no cap space because they don't have a whole lot of talent outside of Russell Westbrook, and I know typically the superstars contract doesn't really affect that too much the way the CBA is structured. But outside of him, I guess everybody else is just highly overpaid on that squad. That's the only real solution I can think of. But that's another discussion for another day. Once we actually like hit free agency in the NBA, I know I kind of want to see Chris Paul go to the Spurs. I've been talking about that for a while. So a lot of other people, but let's talk a little more NFL draft, shall we? I know when Friday's show concluded, we only had the results of the first round, and what a crazy first round it was. Some interesting things that happened in the later rounds. Gonna just break things down from the second round on, like notable picks. I see. And I gotta bring it up real quick because I don't have it readily available in front of me because I'm so professional at doing this. But certainly certainly some questionable decisions being made. Interestingly enough, I think the main story of this draft is gonna be like all of these character issue guys, and how they're gonna fit in with everything. So you see a lot of steals at the top of the second round. A lot of guys that graded out as first round talents end up sliding down here. The Chargers, I think, got one of the biggest steals of the draft in the second round with guard Forrest Lamp out of Western Kentucky. I think he's a guy who can easily be a stud for years to come for them. Um, you see Jacksonville get Cam Robinson, and this was a draft where offensive linemen there just weren't a lot of good ones. So almost anybody that got one got a steal because they seem to slip so much in this draft. Carolina goes out and gets a receiver in Curtis Samuel. For whatever reason, NFL Network in their coverage had him listed as a running back. So for those who weren't too knowledgeable of the prospects, that had to be confusing seeing Carolina go running back in the first and second round. But Curtis Samuel will play wide receiver for them. Immediately after, the Vikings end up taking Dalvin Cook, which, if you're the Panthers, makes the Christian McCaffrey pick look even worse to me, knowing that you could have gotten Dalvin Cook in the second round, and you could have gotten somebody better than Curtis Samuel to bolster your receiving core. And this is what this seems to be what the Panthers do. They keep taking wide receivers in these middle rounds and expecting them to come out and perform like superstars. But one of these days, other than just Kelvin Benjamin, you're going to have to invest a higher draft pick in a wideout, to get him, some quality weapons. I mean, he's not Tom Brady. He can't make it work out there with just a bunch of scrub guys. The Bills end up getting Zay Jones, which I think is a pretty good pick. Wide receiver out of East Carolina. It's going to give them a lot of different options when Sammy Watkins inevitably gets hurt. After getting Tre'Davious White in the first round, I think the Bills had a pretty good first couple rounds. But after I saw the Cleveland Browns get DeShone Kizer, who, if I remember correctly, and I've looked this up 4 times over the past weekend, I'm pretty sure he's a local guy. Yeah, comes from Toledo, so you can call it a bit of a homer pick, but this fits. DeShone Kizer in the second round after you already got all the talent on defense and David Njoku at tight end. Cleveland, I think this will be the turning point for them as a franchise. It's clear this is a new look Cleveland. And before I get too far down here, a few picks before DeShone Kizer, Joe Mixon finally went to the Cincinnati Bengals. And there is talk he will actually start over both Jeremy Hill and Giovanni Bernard coming in right away. One thing we all knew about Joe Mixon is the talent is most certainly there. Obviously, the character issues are the big thing holding him back, but only time will tell what happens with all that. Raekwon McMillan, who during the season was thought to be a surefire first-round pick, he falls to the Dolphins in the second round. So, Dolphins are definitely bolstering that defense. They have a lot of faith in that offense led by Ryan Tannehill, that receiving core led by Jarvis Landry. Jay Ajayi obviously had a breakout season last year, so makes sense for them to go defense with their picks. Cowboys, another team who has full faith in their offense, going all defense this draft. They get Chidobe Awuzie and they pick up Jordan Lewis, a couple guys who are thought to be mostly guys who'll play nickel in the NFL, but that's becoming an increasingly important position. So Cowboys, along with the pass rush with Taco Charlton, you're getting could see some dramatic improvement out of Rod Marinelli's squad over there. Juju Smith-Schuster ends up going to the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is only further writing on the wall for a guy like Sammy Coates, who throughout his entire career has had one good game, and I unfortunately was playing against him in fantasy during that one good game, so I'm still pretty salty, but hey. A very head-scratching pick for me was the New Orleans Saints selecting Alvin Kamara near the top of the third round. So you're the Saints. You had Mark Ingram on the roster. You went out and signed Adrian Peterson, and now you're drafting Alvin Kamara. Now I understand Adrian Peterson's not going to be there probably more than another season or two, but third round, I'm sorry, is still not project territory. And I think that's one thing a lot of these teams didn't realize, like in this draft, is when it's appropriate to take a player you're not sure is ever going to start for you. That's fourth round and later. Like the first 2 days, you're looking for guys who are going to come in and start, like more than likely, or at least be in the rotation for you. The first, second, third round is not project territory. If you're not absolutely sure a guy's going to make an impact for you, don't take him in the first 2 days. And Alvin Kamara, I don't see where he fits. He's not a guy you can like move into like play wide receiver or something to that effect. But I just don't understand this pick by the Saints. There was plenty more defense on the board. A guy like Chris Wormley had slid all the way to this point. He gets picked by the Ravens, so I think a good pick by them. A couple other running backs go in the third round. You got Dante Foreman. He ends up going to the Texans. Plays for a team he grew up near, so gonna be a good fit for him, I think. Gets to back up. What is that guy's name? Lamar Miller. Chris Godwin. I know a lot of people made a lot of talk of him. The wide receiver out of Penn State. He ends up going to the Buccaneers. Buccaneers, when you look at their receiving core, adding Chris Godwin, oof. They already added Deshaun Jackson in the offseason. You had Mike Evans, who's the big outside threat. Big moves being made by the Buccaneers to get Jameis Winston some help. Kansas City Chiefs ended up taking the running back Kareem Hunt out of Toledo. I think that's a very good pick. You kind of needed somebody to help shore up that backfield. Obviously, it's a backfield by committee between West, Hunt, and wear now. So, Giants draft Davis Webb in the third round. I know some people thought he could sneak into the first round. Uh, Most people had him graded out as a second round talent, but very solid pick, I think, by the Giants. Only thing I think they didn't get any help on their offensive line, so that's gonna not help them in the future. But uh, trying to get everything sorted out to get Andy on the show. What's up?
Hey, how's it going?
You ready to talk some NHL?
Yep, sure am.
Okay.
Do you want to? Is this good just over the phone?
Yep. Recording it
All
right now.
Cool. Awesome. All right. So,
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, we're gonna be switching gears a little bit. I'm gonna bring Andrew Dodson onto the show and talk a little NHL playoffs. So, Andy, how much have you been watching of the playoffs so far?
I've seen hockey. Watched most of both games last night, and generally been keeping track of everything that's been going on. Last night was an interesting night for hockey. Showed a lot about where we were in terms of, especially obviously the Western Conference, where the teams were at, and how they were playing. In my opinion, basically how a lot of things are with inexperience.
Okay, so let's start with what is probably the less exciting of these two series, the Preds and the Blues. The Preds take this one 3-1 last night at home and take a 2-1 series lead. What do you think of what's going to happen going forward in this series, Andy?
This series is, I don't think anybody saw Nashville coming in and being as dominant as they have been. St. Louis is one of the hottest teams coming into the playoffs this year. And Nashville obviously just completely shut down and have just been pretty well dominant going, in the series. They're obviously up 2-1 against a very good St. Louis team. And I just, honestly, I don't see them losing any more than like a game or two. They're firing on all cylinders, getting contributions from all over the ice. They brought in Cody McLeod last night for some extra muscle. He ends up putting in the game-winning goal. So it's just, they're 2 goals from defensemen. They're just such a solid team all around. I don't see how the Blues are going to be able to come back from this. They're really going to have to get contributions. They got a goal from Steen last night, but it's just, the guys like Stastny, Tarasenko really going to have to step their game in order for them to get back into the series.
It's interesting to hear you say that about these two clubs. Want to rewind back a little bit. The Blues and the Preds are both the teams that knocked off the top seeds in the West, the Blackhawks and the Wild. Did you see that coming in the first round?
Not at all. I could see the St. Louis knocking off the Wild. Like I said, they were just very strong coming into the playoff. And the Wild had kind of stumbled towards the end of the season. They kind of had a system that I thought was unsustainable because they were relying heavily on Devin Dubnyk to provide them with just stellar goaltending, and he did throughout most of the season. But that you do need more of a contribution up front So I am not really surprised at St. Louis knocking them off. What I did not see coming was the utter domination of Chicago by Nashville. They allowed 3 goals in the entire series, just a complete smackdown, for lack of a better word. It was just something that I never really saw coming. It's like when you look at the Blackhawks' talent, they got obviously Kane and Taves, but then Kane on the line with Panarin, who lit it. Those two lit it up again this season. So just the fact that they were just completely shut down by what is appearing to be a very solid Nashville defense anchored by PK Subban and Roman Josi. It's just, just one of those things that part of the reason why I just don't see Nashville, losing with how they're playing right now. It's just been just complete domination in all 3 zones by that team. So it was definitely a shock when they, swept the Blackhawks.
Yeah, upsets happening in the first round of the playoffs. NBA might want to take notes there.
Yeah, it was. I think that was the first time in NHL history that an 8 seed had swept a 1 seed. So that kind of tells you about the parity in the Western Conference and in the NHL as well.
But one thing I've been noticing through the years about hockey is upsets like that aren't entirely unheard of. Didn't the Kings as an 8 seed go all the way a few years back?
Yeah, they did. And, and that's the thing. It's, as with any sport, it's how you're playing coming into the playoffs. But, you definitely get, I think in hockey it is unique in that you get those teams that barely make it into the playoffs that are actually able to make some moves. And I think this is another case where you get a very good team that was also in just a very good division that was kind of, maybe not living up to their potential throughout the season, but just really hit it hot at the right time. And Pekka Rinne, who's been like the backstop for that team for many years now, has just turned it up to a whole new level. He's, one of the best goaltenders. I would say probably the best goaltender played, maybe other than Jake Allen for St. Louis. Jake Allen's been stellar, but Pekka Rinne has only given up, he only gave up 3 goals in the first series, and and their 2 wins in the 2 goals. So it's just, it's really, when a team that is that hot coming into the playoffs, getting stellar goaltending, it's not unheard of for them to go all the way, as you said, like the Kings did a couple of years back.
Yes, Pekka Rinne gets 22 saves in this one, allowing only 1 goal. But moving on to the Ducks and Oilers. The Ducks pick up a much-needed win on the road here. Oilers had the opportunity to sort of take a suffocating 3-0 lead at home, but Ducks take care of business. And I don't know. You could probably speak more on this, Andy, but I got a sense that too much of the focus for the Ducks in the first 2 games of this series was shutting down Connor McDavid, and it sort of got them out of their game to a certain extent. What do you make of that?
I think you're right. I mean, Connor McDavid right now, in my mind, is like Crosby, as much as people hate it, he's probably still the best player in the world, but Connor McDavid is a close second. And, he showed off some of his talent last night with just a goal that only McDavid could do. He just turns on a dime and rips one past the goalie. But I agree with you. It's, they really have focused on, shutting down McDavid. And it to be fair, it has worked, but to the detriment that they've given up, goals to a bunch of other players. Patrick Maroon has stepped up. Leon Draisaitl has been a threat all season, and he's also playing well. One of the things that happened last night that was sort of, I don't know if it's an anomaly, but Cam Talbot played well entire playoffs, minus 1 or 2 games, and it was the first one that obviously comes to mind was that 7-0 beatdown that the Sharks had on the Oilers in the last series, and that's kind of almost what it seemed like happened last night. It was the Ducks jumped out to a big, 3-0 lead right, in the first 12 minutes of the game. But the Oilers settled back, showed a lot of tenacity, got back at 3-3, and then Cam Talbot knocks in a goal that's going wide. It goes in off his arm, and that just completely deflates everything. They get a goal that might have been offside. It was very close, but it still stands. And it's just it's for Anaheim. I think that they have one of the best defensive players in Ryan Kessler, so they can shut down Connor McDavid, but they really did get back to their game last night and were able to pull out a necessary win, because you did not want to back to the Oilers on 3-0 in the series. So that's and John Gibson stood on his head for the majority of that game. So that was they seemed to be firing better, even though their second period was pretty lackluster. They seem to be doing better.
Yeah, and I think that transitions well into the next series we're going to talk about, the Pens and the Caps, because the Caps are staring down 3-0 deficit on the road as well. Do you think they'll be able to bounce back in the way the Ducks did?
That's going to be tough, because the way it looks, Pittsburgh just looks so talented. They look like they just are just clicking together. Obviously, as I said before, Sidney Crosby is he's Sidney Crosby, and he's performing the way the best player in the world needs to perform. It's sort of the testament, I think, to superstars. It's just like they make those around them better. And if you look at Jake Gunsel on, a rookie on his line, now has the most points by a Penguins player or Penguins rookie ever for any playoff. So it's just like we're 2 games into the second series, and this Jake Gunsel guy is just taking off.
Already has 7 goals in the playoffs. It's astounding.
Yep, and it's just one of those things where when you get contributions, the guy who previously held the record, Brian Russ, who accomplished that last year, is also putting up big points. Evgeny Malkin, Phil Kessel, even though they are missing Letang on the back end, they're just such a strong, deep team. Evgeny Malkin has 13 points with 10 assists on the playoffs, and Jake Gunsel has 7 goals in 7 games. It's just it's hard to stop a team like that, especially when they're getting the kind of work that Marc-Andre Fleury is putting in. A lot of talk was about, in the past, Marc-Andre Fleury has not been a playoff performer. And I know it was an injury that kind of led to Matt Murray's rise last year and taking them to the Cup. But, as of right now, it's Marc-Andre Fleury's job to lose. It's just he is playing so well. And it's just, I think it's going to be hard for Washington to come into Pittsburgh's barn and take him down. Obviously, I thought it was a big step for Anaheim to be able to do that in Edmonton, but Washington is notorious for underperforming in the playoffs. So they're going to need a big performance from Ovechkin, big performance from Backstrom, and more importantly, Braden Holtby, who gave up 3 goals on 11 shots in the last game. They're going to need him to step up if anything's going to happen. It's goaltending is the most important thing when it comes to the playoffs. So if they're going to, win this next game, which is, for all intents and purposes, a must-win, Holtby's going to really need to step his game up.
Okay, and moving on to the other series in the East. First of all, do you see either of these teams, the Rangers or the Senators, do you see them possibly pulling off an upset in the Eastern Conference Finals over Pittsburgh, or given if the Capitals can make a comeback from down 2-0.
I think it'll be interesting. I really like what I'm seeing from Ottawa. They are tenacious. They came back from, a 5-3 deficit in the last game. 3 minutes left in the game, and Jean-Gabriel Pageau, who had the game of his life, puts in 2 goals in the last 3 minutes. It's just a lot of tenacity, a lot of grit to get to that point and, put themselves in a position to win. I don't know if it's sustainable. I mean, Erik Karlsson is probably the best defenseman in the game right now. So it's just, it's hard to discount them. Craig Anderson leaves a little bit to be desired between the pipes, but I really like Ottawa in this series. New York has been relatively lackluster, only 4 points from Rick Nash. Just there hasn't been a whole lot of production up front, and really they've relied on Lundqvist to carry them through the series with Montreal. And they're obviously down 2-0 in this series, but they are going back home. They might be able to step it up there, and they're going to really need to get production from their big guys, because as of right now, the leading goal scorer for the Rangers is Brady Shea, who is a defenseman. Like, he's not known for his goal scoring, but he's been really the one. He had 2 goals in the last game, so they're going to need guys like Zuccarello and Nash to really step up. And it's just one of those things that these are 2 good teams. I don't know how well they'd fare against either Washington or Pittsburgh, because those, I'm thinking Pittsburgh looks so good right now that it's going to be tough. I mean, they did get outshot, but they're just getting from all over the place. It's tough, obviously, for either of these teams that make it through. I'm thinking Ottawa probably has the edge, and I think that Ottawa probably has a better shot of what I would call an upset over whoever's going to make it through from the other series.
Okay, well, we only got one game tonight. It's going to be the aforementioned Caps and Pens. Who you got winning tonight, Andy?
Even though everything that I've just said, I think that, the Capitals are going to come out with a vengeance. They dropped 2 games in their own barn. They really need it. I know Holtby is going to be upset about the way he played in the last game, getting pulled in the first period. I think they're going to come out hungry, and it's going to be a very good game. And I think that they'll be able to pull it off. If it really comes down for me to Holtby is how well he's going to play, because the Capitals really outshot the Penguins in the last game. And if they can get a decent contribution from their goalie, I think that Ovechkin and the boys can get it done.
And before I get you out of here, Andy, I want to ask you a few NFL draft questions. How do you think your Broncos came out this year?
Okay. They got Garrett Bowles with the first pick, which I know it's an interesting pick because he's obviously very physically talented. He's a big guy, but he has had problems in the past with drugs and other facets of his life.
He ain't the sharpest tool in the shed.
Yeah, that too. He's more brawn than he is brains, obviously. But the one I'm really excited about, obviously, is big Michigan tight end Jake Butt going there.
Yeah, dude.
He's obviously I was surprised at how far he dropped. Obviously, he, with that torn ACL in the bowl game, which, is going to be a hot topic for many years to come in college football, and starts playing bowl games. But watching him at Michigan, he is such a talented player and a big-time playmaker. That's really where the Broncos had no contribution virtually at all last year. So I'm looking to see him, line up and, catch a couple passes from God knows who's going to start for the Broncos at quarterback. But, yeah, that's the one I'm most excited about. And, we got Mr. Irrelevant Chad Kelly coming in, so you never know. So, should be interesting.
I want to thank you for coming on, Andy. This was fun. Got to have you on more often.
Yep, and should be interesting to see how these next couple games play out in the NHL.
Yeah, we'll certainly try to have you on before the Stanley Cup Finals at some point. Maybe breaking down some conference finals.
Yep, that's right.
All right.
All right,
Andrew
thanks, George.
Dotson, everybody. First appearance on the Direct Sports Daily podcast. Talk to you later, Andy.
Yep, thanks, George.
But like Andy alluded to, the Broncos take Jake Butt in the 5th round with the pick they got from Cleveland. I think this was one of the big steals of later on in the draft. You see a ton of Michigan players get selected. 11 to be exact. You had Delano Hill, Jordan Lewis, obviously Jabril Peppers and Taco Charlton go in the 1st round. You get Amara Darbo, J.U. Chesson, Jeremy Clark, Jake Butt, and the list goes on and on. It sort of cements how stacked this Michigan roster was and how much of a shame it was we couldn't see them go on to make the playoffs. And then, yeah, obviously in the Orange Bowl, they were without Jabril Peppers and end up dropping that game. But gonna be a difficult season headed forward for the Wolverines. You're set at quarterback, but you have questions all over the place. A very talented but young receiving crew coming into Michigan with Tarek Black. You got Donovan Peoples-Jones. Gonna be hard to replace all the talent here in Ann Arbor, but looking at other notable late round picks, you had the Lions pick up Brad Kaya out of Miami, who I'm surprised this story didn't gain traction until he was selected by the Lions, but Brad Kaya is actually the son of the actress who played Felicia from the movie Friday, and the source of all the Bye Felicia memes that have been making the rounds the past few years. So very interesting to see if he'll end up being even the most famous person in his household. I like the pick by the Lions. Some people had Brad Kaya earlier this season. I'd say around after game 2 or 3, I looked at a few mock drafts, and they had him going top 5. And I thought, okay, this guy's going to certainly be a bust if he's taken in the top 5. But 6th round, for him to slide that far, I think the Lions got a steal. He's a guy you can develop behind Matthew Stafford and could potentially come in and at the very least be somebody you dangle out there as trade bait, sort of Jimmy Garoppolo style. I remember the Falcons pulling off a huge deal for Matt Schaub to the Texans after just showing him off in a few preseason games for years after years. And I think Brad Kai could end up being that for the Lions. I think this leaves a guy like Jake Rudock, who they selected last year. He may end up being the odd man out in all of this, but I really like the pick. Like Andy mentioned earlier, Chad Kelly goes to the Broncos as Mr. Relevant. I believe he's the nephew or cousin of former NFL quarterback Jim Kelly. So, Bucky Hodges, the tight end out of Virginia Tech, who a lot of people had slated as a second-round pick, he ends up sliding all the way to the 6th round, and the Vikings end up scooping him up. So you could see him in a couple 2 tight end sets with Kyle Rudolph, and that could end up being pretty dangerous. The Vikings are obviously trying to build around Sam Bradford, and I know it came out earlier this week that they may not even try to pick up the option they have on Teddy Bridgewater, given that he's probably going to be out all of next season as well. But I think that about covers everything. NFL draft, at the end of the day, we'll hear a lot more about all these guys come camp and see how they do in their various position battles. Samaje Perrin, he ends up going to Washington in the 4th round, along with D.D. Westbrook, so a couple of Oklahoma guys. D.D. Westbrook goes to the Jacksonville Jaguars. So that's about all I have to say about the draft. That's gonna about wrap it up for today. Let's see if there's this was weird. The Bills, right? Immediately after the draft, they fire their GM. Yeah, the Bills, not the Bears. I can understand if it was the Bears, because like there were some fireable offenses made by the Bears on Friday, or I'm sorry, on Thursday, but yeah. Oh, the Colts ended up drafting Ken Griffey Jr.'s son, Trey Griffey, aka Ken Griffey III. They didn't draft him, they signed him. So apparently he plays wide receiver. Good genes, obviously his father and his grandfather. Great baseball players. We'll see how Trey Griffey does in the NFL. Paul Pierce ends up retiring after 18 seasons. He'll probably be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Great career. Was the centerpiece of the Celtics for years. Gonna be we're already seeing sort of the next generation of the Celtics. Gonna be interesting to see who they add to that. And apparently Takk McKinley will not be fined for his on-stage profanity and dropping all those F-bombs at the NFL draft. Lucky for him. Like Deion Sanders said, he needs to sort of find a way to channel all that energy and let it go on the football field. Apparently the Eagles are expected to release Ryan Matthews, so that could end up being interesting. I don't know what could happen there. Apparently it's going to be a running back by committee led by Wendell Smallwood. You can't really love this if you're Carson Wentz, but that pretty much is what it is. The show ran a little long today. I try to usually keep it between 30 and 40 minutes. We're hitting the 50-minute mark. So as much as I would love to stay and talk even more, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I want to thank everybody for watching and listening. It's been fun again. Loved having Andy on. Unfortunately, Rob had to cancel last minute, and he couldn't be on. But barring anything unforeseen, we should be able to get him on tomorrow. But like I said, thanks for watching and listening, and I will see you tomorrow with more Direct Sports Daily.
This has been another episode of Direct Sports Daily. Thanks for listening, and to keep up with the show, follow us on Twitter at the DSD Podcast. Subscribe to us on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher Radio, or visit our website, www.directsportsdaily.com.